Welcome to Physician Heal Thyself, the podcast, empowering you to take a whole person approach to your well-being, spirit, soul, and body. Join me, your host, Dr. Lara, naturopathic doctor, entrepreneur, and a servant of Jesus Christ. We are not just a body, we are spirit and soul. It's time to integrate medicine and spirituality into our healing. Let's get started. Welcome back to Physician Heal Thyself, the podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Lara. Today, I want to talk about one addiction that we all justify, and that addiction is overeating. So I want to explain so that there's a better understanding about what are the real causes that are beneath all those cravings and the desire to eat and overeat, right? So we're going to go over a couple of different categories, especially as we get into the holidays. You know, we see this a lot. We justify eating a little extra on Thanksgiving, on Christmas, New Year's, and any family event, gathering, any gatherings that we do. Food is just such a central part of our focus in any kind of event or gathering, right? It's a social time. And so oftentimes when I instruct patients to modify and change their diets, they soon start to realize that by modifying their diets, it creates a shift in their socialization when they're going out to eat, and people are asking, why aren't you eating this, or eat this and eat some more, and from family to friends, right? And so sometimes that can be very difficult to make dietary changes when it's for health reasons, but it's very, very worth it. Now, I do find people that oftentimes will confess like they're just never satisfied. And while there are several areas that can contribute to why we're not fully satisfied or why we overeat, yes, it could be emotional, it could be trauma, right? And it revs up our nervous system, so we want to overeat. That could be one of the things. But sometimes it could be a nutritional deficiency, not eating enough of the right foods, deficient in certain nutrients. So we're going to talk about that. And then there's another component that oftentimes, a lot of times in medicine, it's overlooked, and that's hormonal or metabolic imbalances. So we're going to go over those categories. The first category that I really want to hone in and address of why you may be overeating is nutritional deficiency. So what does that mean, right? I'm not just talking about vitamins and nutrients. I'm talking about maybe the person is just not eating enough protein and healthy fats. So I've talked about this in many other previous episodes where I talk about if you don't have enough protein intake and healthy fats in your diet, it won't stabilize your blood sugars, and it will increase the risk of having more cravings, right? Especially carb-like cravings. So a common scenario that I see that people make oftentimes a mistake is that they will skip breakfast. They may have coffee, and so they're not going to be full. And they eat maybe at lunch, and then dinner time is their biggest meal. But then they'll always say, I always feel hungry later in the evening. And that's because throughout the day, you didn't get enough protein intake. I guarantee that if you started off your day with a good amount of protein intake, you wouldn't have those cravings later on because your body is fully satisfied and has all the building blocks that it needed throughout the day for energy. I want you to think of food as energy. So skipping breakfast is going to lead you to eating refined carbs. It's going to cause insulin spikes, and it's going to cause you to crash, leading to, I just need to eat something right now. And that's where the cravings come in, whether it's something sweet, something salty, but it's usually a carb that we turn to. Now, protein, it is not just animal-based protein. Understand that there's a lot of other types of protein, nuts and seeds, broccoli. There's vegetables that have protein that you can use, right, to satisfy your protein intake needs. So protein is going to stabilize your appetite hormones. And we're going to talk about what those hormones are later. Healthy fats like omega-3 and olive oil, grass-fed butters, these regulate your hormones. We need fats to make hormones, and also for brain function. So when we get enough healthy fats, we're fully satisfied. The brain is happy. We're making enough hormones, and so we're good. And then there are mineral deficiencies that are kind of very common. You can tell what these deficiencies are and what the craving is associated with. So for example, if you crave chocolate, you are most likely magnesium deficient. So if you were to take a good 3 to 4 milligrams of magnesium glycinate or magnesium citrate, and you start to fill up your body with more magnesium, that chocolate craving will go away. So oftentimes magnesium is a good mineral to get in your system to help with the chocolate cravings. Now, when you're craving potassium and sodium, these are very important minerals that help produce energy. And so you're going to crave salty foods like chips, okay? And this could also be a sign, if you're craving a lot of salty food, this could be a sign that you may have adrenal insufficiency, meaning your adrenal glands are not making enough cortisol. And so you're craving salty. It's needing the salt. So we need to supplement with either foods. You eat the foods that have potassium and sodium, or take some potassium. The other craving that we see a lot is sweets. If you crave a lot of sweets, it's one of two things. It could, when it comes to the dietary part, it could be you're not having enough of the protein and the healthy fats in your diet early on. Or it could be that you have a chromium deficiency. Now, you don't hear about chromium too much, but it is a mineral and it's found in green leafy foods. Unfortunately, a lot of our soil is depleted of chromium, so these foods have had a decline in chromium content. So you can substitute by supplementing, right, with chromium. And usually that will also cut the cravings out. For my patients, I know where they're at, so I typically recommend 500 micrograms in the morning and 500 micrograms in the evening. It's a mineral and it's great to help with those sweet cravings. So dietary steps are very important. Aim to get 25 to 35 grams of protein per meal. And you're going to see that you're going to be fuller. You're not going to have the cravings. And so before you go out to any gathering that there's going to be a lot of food, a lot of temptation, make sure you're not going on an empty stomach, which a lot of people do. They're like, oh, we're going to have food there. But make sure that you're still having your breakfast and lunch. And making sure that you're not overeating. Limit yourself. And I'm going to give some of my tips that I've been telling my patients recently. I always prepare them before the holiday season because I don't want them to jeopardize their hard work and their investment that they've put into all year, right? Just because of some holidays. So then, like I said, the minerals, just replace some minerals. You could do trace minerals. Do the magnesium, the chromium, potassium as you feel needed. And of course, ask your doctor if there's certain medical issues, if there's kidney issues. There's always some, variety of what's safe to take for whom. So remember that sometimes your cravings for junk, it's really because you're craving protein and minerals. And so if you give your body what it needs, you won't be craving the junk food. I guarantee that. The next step I want to talk about is a really lengthy category, actually. I thought about just doing this one category, a whole episode on its own, but I really want to incorporate it in here because I find that aside from the nutritional deficiencies, this is a very, very common area that I find that this is why people are overeating. So it's not, some of it could be behavior, right? But some of it could be your hormones. And the hormones I'm referring to, I'll do just a kind of overview and then go into a step-by-step what each of these hormones are, what are they doing, and what tends to affect them. So hormones like insulin, we're going to do a fasting insulin in the morning. We want to do a C-peptide fasting in the morning, hemoglobin A1C, cortisol, leptin, not very commonly talked about, Ghrelin, and then, of course, all your other sex hormones like estrogen, testosterone, and so forth. So I want to break these down and talk about what are these and what are they doing in our body. So insulin, we're going to start with insulin. Insulin, what does the insulin, how does it work? What is it? So insulin levels are going to affect our appetite by influencing our brain's appetite signals. Our pancreas, there's the beta cells of the pancreas, and those cells release insulin when we eat a carbohydrate. Listen, insulin is released when we eat a carbohydrate, not when you eat protein or a healthy fat. Insulin is important because this is what's going to signal the body to uptake that carbohydrate that gets broken down into glucose, which is a sugar molecule. It'll take the glucose into the cell to make energy. That's what insulin does. However, there's certain amounts of insulin we should have. If it's low, if it's high, if there's an insulin resistance, this is going to increase or affect our hunger and our cravings. So oftentimes, insulin is going to act on the brain to reduce food intake when it's being managed and functioning correctly. That's how it should be. However, oftentimes what I find is that insulin resistance, it's pretty prevalent out there. And if your doctor's not screening for insulin, fasting insulin in the morning and C-peptide, you won't know if you have an insulin resistance. And there are some common signs that you can see. Anything you eat, you feel fatigued afterward. That's because the insulin's not binding to the insulin receptor. So your cells are starving. You're eating, but the cells are starving. And that's why you're hungry again and you keep eating, overeating. And so this insulin resistance disrupts this communication. And that's what causes that persistent hunger. You're never full. You can eat again and you gain weight. And so you tend to have darker spots in your neck or skin tags that you start to grow in your body. And that's one of the signs of insulin resistance, right? So insulin resistance is, like I said, it's a condition in which the body cells become less responsive to the hormone insulin. And so this insulin is going to help sugar, glucose from the bloodstream to enter into cells. And this is where energy is produced and how energy is being used from the glucose. So what does high insulin cause? High insulin that's not insulin resistance can reduce appetite in a normal person. But when there's insulin resistance, it's not going to be able to reduce the appetite. So your brain is saying, I'm still hungry. It should suppress the hunger signals. But like I said, in someone who is insulin resistant, they're still going to have sugar cravings. So insulin is supposed to help shut off the appetite for fats and carbohydrates by influencing those genes that produce proteins like ghrelin, which are going to promote cravings. But if your insulin receptors aren't working effectively, it can't suppress that. So that's why you're going to have the sugar cravings or any craving really. So there's that potential of overeating. And so there's many studies that show that high insulin levels paradoxically increase hunger and they heighten the perception of sweet taste. So we want to eat more sweets. And this is going to lead to more food intake. And so that feedback loop where the body eats more, it's leading to weight gain and then triggers more insulin and so forth and so forth. And if your insulin and blood sugars are off, it's going to have an impact on other hormones, which we're going to talk about. Now, what is C-peptide? I mentioned C-peptide. That might be new to you, but it stands for connecting peptide. It's just a small protein. It's a fragment that helps to synthesize, to make insulin. So C-peptide hormone is the precursor to making insulin in the pancreas. And if that's elevated, then we know that these are the early signs. What I really want you to take away is when C-peptide and insulin are elevated, you already have metabolic, conditions. And so these metabolic conditions are going to impact the way your hunger, your appetite, right? The way you metabolize hormones. And it's one step away from developing diabetes. So this is early screening is a way that I explain to my patients, so that if we screen these and hemoglobin A1C is normal, then I know we really need to stay on top of diet and exercise so that we can prevent that person from developing diabetes. So these are the early signs of someone developing diabetes. It will lead up to diabetes if the person does not make the necessary changes. So like I said, this C-peptide is just a precursor, and it can still affect, our appetite, the signals that our brain receives that it's still hungry. So we want to make sure that we are checking these things out, because some of the signs you're going to have is with both insulin elevated and C-peptide is that you're going to see that people are hungry, they're thirsty, they can even feel dizzy. And so definitely important to check, to look at what is the glucose regulation doing in the body. These things contribute to overeating. Of course, hemoglobin A1C is very commonly known. It's what we use to screen for blood sugars. It looks at the last about 2 to 3 months of where your blood sugars are. And I do test this on some patients every month, and it does change every month quickly. I've seen people go from a hemoglobin A1C of 11 down to an 8 in a month. And so it's very promising, and it's nice for people to see where they're at when they're implementing changes, and how quick of an impact a person can have on reducing this. So normal hemoglobin A1C levels are under 5.6. Anything over 5.6 is considered to be pre-diabetes or diabetes. So we want to check this because this, like I said, this hemoglobin A1C, just like insulin and C-peptide, it is going to increase. It's going to cause a intense hunger, right? Or and depending on the blood sugar, sometimes it can go up and down, but it can affect your appetite. So we want to make sure, once again, make sure you're eating enough protein and healthy fats, because healthy fats and proteins do not affect your blood sugars. They stabilize it. If there's anything you're going to take from this conversation, eat more protein, eat more healthy fats. They're going to stabilize your blood sugars. They're going to keep you more full, and you're going to have a less risk of eating crap. The other hormone that you don't hear a lot about is ghrelin, and this hormone stimulates hunger, right? By acting as a go signal to the brain. But if it's too high, if these levels are too high, it counteracts itself. And so now it's going to affect how fats are stored in your body, but also that hunger and reward system that the brain is sensing. So how ghrelin affects hunger is it's going to signal the brain. It's going to travel through the bloodstream, and it's going to signal the hypothalamus in the brain, and that it's time to eat. It's going to increase your food intake. So a lot of studies show that when you and they administer ghrelin to humans, it increases food intake by 30%. You're motivated for food seeking. So when you have these higher levels of ghrelin, you're actually like seeking for food, like when you're laid up at night and you're looking in your fridge and the pantry and back to the fridge. What's motivating that? It's this hormone ghrelin. It's helping you seek for food, so it's increasing the food's response to food cues and making you pay more attention to and remembering images of food. That's right. You'll even think of that one food you really have to go, and so people will go out and buy it if they don't have it. So it's going to promote, like I said, the food reward system, the motivation to seek and consume food. And it's a test that you can check by blood. It's a blood, you can check it by blood. It's a blood draw, and you check it. And so we want to make sure that we know where are they at. Now, there are some things that affect ghrelin. So what would cause it to go up? It can do a lot to do with your fat metabolism, but the impact of sleep. So if you're not sleeping enough, this will go higher in people. And so we need to make sure that, we're sleeping enough, eating enough protein, eating the right healthy fats, so that all of this can balance out. These hormones are impacted by our lifestyle. What are you eating? When are you eating? How much are you eating? Are you moving your body? Are you sleeping well? I always say you're never going to get away from the 4 pillars of health: nutrition, exercise, stress management, and sleep. quality sleep. So this is an important hormone that it can, if it's elevated, it can and it will make people, have a higher appetite and want to overeat. So yeah, there's a lot of things that can cause this hormone to increase: fasting and reduced calorie intake. So when the stomach is empty and or the body is in a calorie deficit, ghrelin production is going to increase and it's going to stimulate hunger and encourage you to eat. Basically, it's your way your body says, eat, don't starve us. Sleep deprivation is going to be one way that it's going to increase and cause an increase in ghrelin. So we want to make sure that you're sleeping enough. There are certain medications that can affect ghrelin production. And of course, things like stress and anxiety will trigger this hormone to increase. So this is why when you're going through a lot of stressful times in your life, a lot of anxiety, it leads you to cravings, right? It's because this hormone is elevated. Of course, processed foods and sugary foods stimulate ghrelin production. And like I said earlier, low protein intake is going to also cause that. Obviously, with age, our gastric, digestive system works different, so that can also be a risk factor. Just with age, it increases. But definitely an important hormone to check out. The other hormone not very commonly talked about is leptin. So leptin is a hormone that's produced by fat cells, and it signals the brain when we're full. It helps regulate our appetite and our energy. So in a normal, healthy person, you eat food, and once your stomach is like, we've had enough, leptin is released, your brain receives it and says, okay, we're done, stop eating. That's a healthy, normal response. But sometimes people don't have that signal. The brain is not receiving that signal. And if we check leptin levels, which is another blood test, you would see that most of the time it's really high, and it creates leptin resistance. Similar to insulin resistance, there is such a thing called leptin resistance. And so this is saying the brain's not receiving the signal that it's done. So you keep eating, you keep overeating. And on top of that, if you're not overeating, in some people, it can still be elevated. And this is usually where I see it might be more of a genetic factor. I've had people that are eating right, they're exercising, they're having a hard time losing weight, and then I check their leptin levels and they're really high. But then I'll ask some family history, and there's obesity in several family members, right? Like morbidly obesity. And so then I know, okay, this is something we're up against. And there are ways to help the body, right? To bring down those leptin levels so that, they're properly regulating appetite, weight, and energy. So leptin and ghrelin, two very important hormones to consider. Of course, there's other hormones like to take a look at, thyroid hormone. Thyroid metabolism is very important. That can either decrease your appetite, increase your appetite. Hormones like estrogen and testosterone and progesterone, all of those can increase your cravings and mood swings. So you want to make sure that you're regulated there. This is why women, when they go through their period, right, that time of the month, they're craving chocolate and sweets and salty foods. And so now get some magnesium in there, get more protein and healthy fats, maybe add some chromium instead of giving in to the craving. And of course, cortisol, which we talked about. Cortisol is a hormone that it will affect your appetite, your fat metabolism, your weight management as well. So get these tests done. I know a lot of doctors don't want to do them. It's because they don't know what they are. They don't know what to do with it. And if they wouldn't treat it, they're not going to test it. That's the real truth. So find someone who knows what they are, how to treat them as well. So we've talked about, just as a recap, we talked about the nutritional deficiencies, right? So we said not getting enough protein, not getting enough healthy fats, and what else? And minerals, the minerals. So protein, fats, and minerals. We need to get those in our diet first to to note the difference. Are you having less cravings or are you still having cravings? And if you are having cravings, then you could do the blood test to specifically target those things to check the hormones. However, the end result, what I'm trying to say is that the way we're going to treat those hormones is still the same, which is the diet. We got to get the right foods in. The timing, the quantity, the right combination of protein and fats and healthy carbohydrates, complex carbohydrates like your vegetables, right? And if there's things that you need to supplement to help regulate those hormones in the meantime, then we could add the supplements. But you can never fix these issues with just supplementing and not changing the diet. You can't fix these issues with just, I'm going to take these supplements and herbs and still not sleep well, stress a lot, not eat well. It doesn't work that way. It's a lot of these issues are because of how we eat and how we are living our lives. So we need to make that lifestyle change so that we can have the long-lasting results. And you don't have to be on supplements and herbs for the rest of your life. You only take what you need, not supplement all the time. So we're going to move on to the next category, which is the emotional roots of what's going on, and even traumas, right? So anytime I confess, I used to be an emotional eater when I was younger. And I notice now when I have a lot of stress, I want to eat. It's a way that it soothes us. And you have to understand child development to understand why we want to eat, to put things in our mouth, because it soothes us. As babies, when we're born, there's a reflex, which is a sucking reflex, right? That's how we eat. That's how we nourish ourselves as babies to live. It's survival. It's the first thing we learn. We know how to do it in our mother's womb. Babies are oftentimes seen in their mom's womb, in an ultrasound, sucking their thumb, sucking their hand, because that's soothing to the brain. That sucking reflex soothes the brain. And so when we're born, we're either breastfed or bottle fed, and that's a soothing effect. Some babies do like to suck their thumb. That's a soothing effect. They're self-soothing. Or the parents will give the baby a pacifier to pacify, to calm them down. It's not just for them not to cry. They're crying because there's something that they're not feeling good about. So it calms them down when they suck reflex. That doesn't change, guys. It doesn't change when we get older. We still have that innate desire to soothe ourselves. And unfortunately, some of those soothing mechanisms are food. This is why food addiction I think it's the most common addiction, not talked about enough, not taken serious, right? And there's not enough real support for this. We justify overeating. We almost joke, people joke about it. In families, in churches, in school, everyone, where there's food, it's going to be a feast. And we're not paying attention to the risk of what it's causing us. Overweight, obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure, cholesterol. That's going to lead to heart disease. It's going to lead to heart attacks and strokes. It's going to lead to autoimmune conditions. It's going to lead to hormone imbalances. That's going to lead to depression. And it's going to lead to anxiety. So you get a temporary satisfaction and calming effect from eating food. But if you've done this, you know this. If you've been there, you know this is true. You eat that chocolate cake and it felt good while you were eating it. But then what? You feel guilty. You feel shame. You feel like crap. Because now your brain turns on and you know you should have done better. But now there's this shame and guilt that you carry. And then maybe you go for another piece or maybe something else. And I'm not shaming anyone, because I caught myself in my late 20s that this is the way I was coping with stress. And that is not a healthy outlet. It's much better that you go for a walk, that you pray, that you meditate, that you read a book, that you talk to someone, take a nap. But it's not turning to food. Now we look at other addictions, drinking alcohol, drugs, anything it's soothing. It is soothing when anything that has to do with what we put in our mouth. So you need to be very conscious about that connection and catch yourself and get help. Now, there are emotional support groups for people who have, food addictions. And I have referred patients to these groups to work through their problems. Now, sometimes it is a trauma response, right? It's a fight-flight response. And it's a way that it helps us. It's a coping mechanism. Food oftentimes becomes a coping mechanism for unmet emotional needs, for loneliness, for anxiety, for past traumas, and sometimes just because we're bored. That's the honest truth. So eating is going to release this chemical called dopamine and serotonin, which this offers this temporary relief or distraction, makes us feel good for the moment. But you know what? Working out does the same thing too. Go for a walk, get a dopamine kick. It helps you to feel good too. But when we're overeating, this can create a sense of safety, right? And control. On the flip side, there's things you can control too. I always say the one thing that we can control is what we choose to eat, right? So if there's trauma involved though, we must not ignore that. We need to heal that. We need to heal those wounds. If there's, and I don't want to go into detail about what kinds of trauma, but most people know what kinds of trauma is going to involve, overeating, and even if a child grew up in a home where food scarcity was a thing, right? When they did have food, they would eat as much as they could in the moment to get us full because they didn't know if they were going to have a meal later that day. And so that creates this pattern, this behavioral pattern with food that now that they're older, they could be well off, they have money, and they're not deprived of food anymore. But still, their brain is still wired of, there's food, let me just overindulge. And so we need to address those deeper emotional wounds, those deeper traumas to address the overeating, right? You don't judge people who are overweight because sometimes it's not that they're overeating. Sometimes they are not eating enough of protein. They're starving themselves. Starving yourself is not going to help you lose weight. And it could be some of these hormone imbalances, that I mentioned earlier. So it could be many different reasons, genetic reasons that people are morbidly obese. So we need to address those issues. But true healing is going to start with awareness. You got to ask, what am I really hungry for right now in my life? Like, what's the void that you're trying to fill and satisfy that food is not touching that? And this is where we need to lean on in our spiritual walk, ask God, what am I really hungry for? I've learned that with cravings with sugar, right? This is something I craved a lot when I was, years ago, and still I do sometimes, is that I had to ask myself, where in my life have I lost the sweetness of life? What are the sweet things of life, the joyful things of life that I am needing to fulfill, that I'm turning to the cravings? Because I'm telling you, there's always an emotional component sometimes to overeating or to desiring certain foods. So when I started to realize, I was pretty bored with my life. I was in a corporate environment. Everything was go, 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 and succeed and overachieve and meet all and exceed all these expectations. And the more you do, you glorify yourself with more work. And it was boring. I got too rigid. And so I lost the sweetness of life. I was losing that sweetness of life, and I had to find it back so that I found what was it in my life that I needed to fulfill. So you want to practice more mindful, practice some more mindfulness when we're eating. Be intentional. This is why I don't like eating out. I'll go out to eat maybe with a friend here and there, but you'll know, my friends who are hearing, they'll know most of the time I take most of my food back. Because we're talking and there's noise and there's all this noise in the restaurant, and I can't enjoy my food that way. And so and they do this intentionally too, by the way. Restaurants do this intentionally. They create this atmosphere to distract your brain of I'm full. So eating out is not, if you're having a problem with cravings and overeating, I would really encourage that you minimize the time that you're eating out at restaurants and sit at home with your food and really pause and take a look at your food, pray over your food and give thanks for your food and enjoy each moment instead of just shoving it down your mouth. Just enjoy each bite. You'll find that there's more pleasure. So now if I eat something like a chocolate cake, I'm getting a very small slither and I'm enjoying every bite. And that to me is satisfying and fulfilling. I don't need a big slice. I don't even need a full size, just a little slither. And so for these holidays, just think about, I'm going to get a little slither of these things that I really want to try, that I want to sample. Don't give yourself a full serving of each thing. If there's a lot of food, identify, okay, which are the protein sources that I really want to have? Which is the dessert that I really want to have? And limit yourself. You have to limit yourself and say, I'm going to get a little bit of pumpkin pie. I want to maybe get a little bit of that brownie or whatever it is. But you can cut pieces of it so that you can still enjoy those without having a full serving. And then you don't feel bad about it because you've gotten small little pieces. You can also journal your food. When I have patients do this, and I say, start a food journal. I want you to write everything you eat and drink, everything you consume in the morning for the rest of the day, at least 3 days. But if you can, do a 7-day food diet diary. And also note your emotional patterns. Like if you had that Snickers bar, what were you feeling? I was feeling stressed, overwhelmed, bored. Someone pissed me off, whatever it was. Write that on there. And you're going to see the correlation of your behavior along with the emotional patterns of your day, right? Your stressors. And also consider doing some trauma-informed therapy, whether it's, I mentioned like a support group for people who have food addictions, EMDR, or any kind of somato-emotional experiencing cognitive behavioral therapies that help, right, to identify, why am I doing this? They can be very helpful and better direct you if there's emotions and trauma there. But even if there's emotions and trauma there, if you get the right amount of protein and healthy fats, that's going to cut out a lot of your cravings. And then if you identify which hormones are out of balance, that's also going to further help you. So when you do get the emotional support and counseling that you need, that therapy is going to be definitely more effective than if you did nothing and just went to the therapist. So I like that holistic approach, right? So there's a quote that I wrote is that you can't heal emotional hunger with physical food. You're filling a void. You will always feel empty. And it is a vicious circle. And so once you meet the needs of your physical body, your mental, emotional body, you're going to see that, healing is a part of, it's integrating all of this. So there is no magic trick to overeating. Sometimes people want to go to just that one pill that's going to suppress your appetite. But unfortunately, that pill or that shot or that medication that's very popular right now, I'm not going to say names, but sometimes these medications, they come with a huge price to pay. If something's going to slow down your digestive system, right? It's going to suppress your digestive system. It's going to affect the way your body's absorbing nutrients, and it's going to create. It could potentially create, long-term consequences to that. So let's address things at the root cause, because we can heal from overeating. It's about listening more to our body and our needs, and not just shoving food in our mouth because it tastes good. And that's the reality. Food tastes good, but it shouldn't be our drug. If you're turning to food as a way to satisfy you completely, you're going to find that you're broken. There's a brokenness there. And I know for myself, speaking, I caught myself in my late 20s. It was late night. I was kind of hiding. I was eating a bag of chips. And my daughter was about almost 2. And she got up and she sat with me and we had chips together. And we finished the bag. And then my daughter said, I want more. And I got up to get another bag of chips. And that's when I stopped and I thought, what am I doing to my daughter? And what am I doing to myself? I don't want this for her. I don't want this for me. And so I put the bag away and I said, I think we've had enough for today. Let's brush your teeth. Let's go to bed. And this is before I went to medical school. So I knew I have a food addiction. I've never used drugs or cared for alcohol, but food is an addiction for many. And let me tell you, there is a genetic test. There's several genetic tests that can see if you have a higher risk of overeating, of having cravings, right? Of having more of the food addictions. And I know I did that test myself and it aligned. I don't have an increased risk for drug or alcohol addictions, but food cravings, I was high on all of them. So I thank God that He snatched me up that night, made me be more self-aware of making the changes that I needed to make, seeking the help that I needed to make. I was never morbidly obese, thank God. But I just know that if I hadn't made the changes then, I could have. And so, with the holidays, this episode's going to air on Thanksgiving and in time, right? Hopefully you listen to it this day. But even for, Christmas and New Year's and any other future event, have self-control, right? That's one of the fruits of the Spirit in the Bible. It's self-control. And we should have self-control with what we choose to eat. Hey, I hope that this conversation brought just some new insight to you. And if you learned something new through this episode, please share it, like it, share with someone else, someone who might be struggling with overeating, and they might start to think, oh, it's not just because I am just wanting to overeat, there is a reason. Don't justify it, do something about it. So hey, until next time, have a happy Thanksgiving and be blessed. Thank you for listening to Physician Heal Thyself, the podcast. If you like what you've heard, please like, share, and subscribe. Help this message reach more people who may need to hear it. Leave your comments. I want to know what you think. If you're interested in learning more about Raices, visit our website at raicesndmedcenter.com. Until next time, be blessed.